My name is Lan Elliott on behalf of DEI Advisors, which is an Arizona nonprofit dedicated to empowering personal success. Today, I'm really pleased to have Noah Silverman here with us, and he is the Global Development Officer for US and Canada for Marriott International. Welcome, Noah.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Good to see you.
I've been looking forward to having you on, so really glad that the day is here. And Noah, I know you're just about at your 26th anniversary at Marriott International, and you've had multiple roles over the years. I think I met you when you were an attorney a few years back. We won't say how many, but would love to hear a bit about your journey and some of the inflection points, and maybe what are the factors that you think have contributed to your success.
Sure. At least in terms of inflection points, there were a few kind of critical ones as I look back, and it is hard to imagine that it's already been almost 26 years. But I did start my life as a lawyer. I was a kind of a native of the D.C. Maryland area, and after law school, I came back to D.C. and worked at a law firm. And one of the things I learned fairly quickly after being at the firm was that that life, at least on a permanent basis, was not going to be for me. So a few years into my tenure at the law firm, I started looking for other things that I could do. And really, the kind of initial significant inflection point was when I made the decision to leave private law practice in DC and join Marriott International back in 1997 in our law department. And in a litigation role at the time. That's what I was doing in law practice was civil litigation. And so I kind of consider myself an accidental entrant into the hospitality business. Unlike so many people that you meet in hospitality that knew that it was a field they wanted to go in, or an industry they wanted to work in, even as early as sort of applying and going to college. All I really knew was that I didn't want to leave the DC metro area when I was looking to leave the law firm. And so coming to Marriott in 97 in our law department was a significant kind of initial inflection point for me, and a very happy accident in hindsight. Obviously, I've been here a lot of years and have really enjoyed my time in this industry, and taking that leap to come here back in 97 was a huge part of that. Maybe secondly was after having been at Marriott for a few years, I realized that it wasn't necessarily about where I was practicing law. It was more the practice of law that I didn't really love. And so, to my eternal gratitude, Marriott didn't only offer me an opportunity to come in and work at Marriott to begin with in our law department, but also gave me an opportunity once I decided that I no longer really wanted to be a practicing lawyer, period, to move out of the law department and move to a role on the business side. And I did that back in 2002. So even that now is more than 20 years ago, into a role in our then relatively new global asset management team. And that was another kind of significant evolution. At that point, I'd been a lawyer for almost 10 years. It's what I'd been trained to do. It's really all I knew how to do. I'd certainly been told that law degrees were useful for doing different things. And there were others that came before me at Marriott that had moved from the law department to the business side, but having been given the opportunity to move into that role on our asset management team was another huge kind of opportunity for me to change the direction of my career, and allow me to go pursue something that in hindsight I enjoyed a heck of a lot more than the practice of law. And then maybe just the last one I'll mention in terms of inflection point is when I came into the development discipline. So I did a bunch of different things in the business side after leaving the law department, between asset management, project finance, development asset management. And it was in 2010 that I finally came into a role in our development team, leading our U.S. and Canada full service development team, working for Tony at the time, who was running, Tony Capuano, our now CEO, who obviously was running then our global development organization. And having been given the opportunity to come into development in 2010 was another significant inflection. And obviously, I've been in development in the years in now 2 different roles ever since, and have just loved that opportunity and that role, and have been doing it longer than I've done any other role that I've done at Marriott, but have also enjoyed it more than any other job.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There have been a number of attorneys that have done really well at Marriott. I'm thinking of Arnie Sorensen, who actually is also a litigation attorney, I think, before he joined Marriott, and obviously had an incredible career and was your last CEO.
Yeah,
Um,
Arnie was a hero to a lot of us for a lot of ways, but for me in particular, he kind of wore an extra special cape because he was really an unbelievable example of someone who had managed to transition from the practice of law to a really, really successful career, ultimately, obviously leading the business as our CEO. And I held him up as a personal hero for a lot of reasons, that one included.
yeah, I think he was a hero for really a lot of people, not just at Marriott, but beyond as well.
Yeah.
One of the things we hear from leaders is that curiosity is such a big part of their path and helps them to grow in their career. And we find that as you develop in your career, you need different skills. And sometimes we encounter a skill that we didn't realize was going to be important to us as a leader. And then we need to fine tune it or even develop it from scratch. Is there something in your career, one of these skills that you encountered and said, you know what, I need to work on this, develop it a little bit more?
Just one, or you want a list of like 100? I mean,
Why don't you pick one?
I'm trying to learn. I continue to try to learn every day. I mean, there are some things that kind of jump out at me, and I just mentioned back in 2002 when I made the transition from having practiced law again for almost a decade to moving into a role on our asset management team, and that was a really significant shift for me because lawyers really do kind of process information using words, right? So if you gave me a 100-page contract in the days that I was working on our franchise team in the law department, I felt very highly skilled at being able to read that contract, understand that contract, interpret its different provisions, and offer an opinion on it. On the other hand, if you gave me at that point in time what to many people would be a fairly simple single-page spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers on it, kind of intuiting information from that one page was not really a skill set that I had. And I really did have to develop that. I had to think differently about, I mean, there were certainly skills that I brought from having been a lawyer to working in asset management, negotiation skills, structuring skills, being able to think about how to solve problems, which lawyers do a lot and which business people do a lot, but in different ways. But I also had to understand the sort of levers of the business from a financial perspective and an accounting perspective and a numbers perspective. And, at that point, my math had largely ended maybe my first year of college. In fact, when I started taking, I went to college thinking I might be an econ major, and I loved Econ 101, which was macroeconomics. Then when I got to micro, I'm like, oh, there's way too much math and graphs and other stuff on here. Like, I can't do it. So, I really felt like I had kind of a limited depth when it came to really sort of complex math. And thankfully, a lot of what we do in our industry is really not that complex. But I did have to retrain, or maybe in some ways train for the first time, kind of the portion of my brain that could learn how to look at that spreadsheet, whether it's a pro forma or valuation, and just understand really what the numbers were saying from that page. And honestly, I mean, I've now been doing this 20 plus years, and I still don't think I'll ever do that in some ways as well as some people that came, sort of through that financial or accounting background. But I've also learned to, embrace that the need to learn and develop there, focus on that, develop that skill set, and then realize that, well, there are some other skills that I bring to the table that maybe some others that don't have the legal background may not have as well. So it will always feel like, I'm carrying or walking with a bit of a crutch around some of those things. But that's maybe the example that comes most to mind of one where I really had to lean in and learn something new that was way out of my comfort zone in order to be effective and good at the role that I was, that I'd been entrusted with at the time, and still have to think about those things as part of my current role.
Yeah, and I think a couple things come to mind when I hear what you were just saying about learning the financial side of the development role. I came up on the financial side doing more quantitative things, and then when they finally stuck me doing a contract and negotiating contract, that for me was a big learning piece.
Sure.
But I think there are always transferable skills, right? Because I ended up using my analytical skills to read contracts in an analytical way, and how do we leverage what rights we have in this document,
I
and how
give this advice to people all the time. Like, don't allow people to tell you you're not skilled or ready for a different kind of role. It's all in some ways about how you sort of package yourself, and the ability to, maybe it's to genericize your skill set so that it's more translatable into a different role than the one that you were doing. Again, that transition from law to asset management, for me, or what we called asset management, which is actually quite different at Marriott than it is at in a lot of other hospitality businesses. But that negotiation side of the business, that problem solving side, that understanding, how to sit across the table from somebody who may be unhappy with a situation and work through, and not being afraid of that conflict. Those were all skills that came from the practice of law that I brought with me to the business side, and then needed others to kind of develop alongside them to be effective in those roles. But sometimes it's about, kind of the marketing pitch on what you can do and how it applies to the job you're looking at.
Yeah, and Joel Eisman, who started that group at Marriott, had brought a number of attorneys that were very successful in that asset management, who went on to development, like Michael Evans, who we've had on the show as well. So
Yeah, I just watched your interview with Michael the other day, and it was a little bit of a trip down memory lane, because obviously we were colleagues in that group at the time.
Absolutely, I think Joel saw, the ability for the transferable skills, and it was just really very smart in the way he looked at it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we had touched on it a little bit, but you had mentioned previously how you enjoy taking on challenges. Could you share a little bit about how seeking out challenges impacted your career?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it impacted my career in a couple of ways. One, I do think that anybody who's kind of willing to do or jump into hard problems, and then finds ways to help solve them, tends to get, maybe more attention than some others. So, that group that we've now spent a decent amount of time talking about, that was my first non-legal role here, tended to work on a fair number of pretty, it was 2002. So we were, coming out of the, we're really in the middle. When I first joined that group was 2002. So we were kind of in the middle of of a recession at the time. There were a lot of challenges in the industry, post 9/11, and in the recession, that really had started in some ways a little earlier. And so working through a lot of those challenges, they tended to be high profile issues, and finding solutions to them, especially when those solutions were maybe kind of the least bad outcome, as opposed to one that anybody really is super happy with. And then helping the company to understand that was the right path to take. It created visibility to things I was working on that definitely had impact on my career longer term because of the challenge. And so I think being willing to embrace challenge can be rewarding kind of in and of itself as well. But in this case, it was rewarding in terms of creating visibility and opportunity for me longer term. And then there is the development that comes, I think, from taking on challenges and working on hard stuff. It just kind of sharpens your skill set and your abilities in ways that ultimately I think are, again, transferable to multiple different opportunities and roles. I've done a bunch of different things in my time at Marriott. I think each of those different jobs has given me a perspective that has helped me learn about look through different lenses and learn different things that serve as building blocks for additional challenges or opportunities that may come going forward. It's true of, I think, leadership and running the team as well, but also true of the more kind of specific projects and other things that you might be working on within your team.
Yep. It also means that you're always learning new things as you're moving from one thing to another, right? Just that importance of a growth mindset where you're continuing to learn.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I've always been driven by at least some degree of intellectual curiosity, and so, one of the things actually I realized about, or one of the motivating factors, I should say, about why I ultimately didn't want to continue to practice as a lawyer is that, as lawyers get more seasoned, generally speaking, you are being, sort of paid for your expertise in a particular area. And so I don't think there's too many people that really want to be working with a lawyer that, 20 years into a career is doing something kind of for the first time. With tenure should come expertise on that side. And yet there was this mindset, and maybe it's true of other places as well, but certainly was true at Marriott. There was a mindset at Marriott that having different roles broadened you as a potential leader in a way that was going to create opportunity. And so that, what I realized is that played more naturally to just me as a person, that I didn't really, I would start to lose motivation if I felt like I was gaining a certain level of expertise in a topic. And as soon as I got close enough to, I obviously never got to kind of perfect knowledge about anything. But as I got to whatever the sort of threshold was, there was always a threshold at which I felt like, I know enough about this. I want a new challenge. So let me think about going somewhere else where I'm going to take my knowledge level maybe from 85% back to 45% and then start learning and growing again. And it seemed like there were more opportunities for me to do that and challenge myself that were rewarding to that kind of intellectual curiosity in different business roles than would have been the case had I stayed as a lawyer. And so that just was really appealing to me, the opportunity to kind of continually seek out things that I didn't know as much about, but motivated me to learn and come up that learning curve and kept me engaged and ultimately more satisfied in my job and career path than I otherwise might have been, just kind of stagnant in one role where maybe I had perfect knowledge, but just no longer feeding that kind of curiosity that I've got.
it definitely feeds into being comfortable, being uncomfortable, that concept where if you're always growing, you're always learning new things and looking for a new challenge, that's something that you need to be okay with, not being the expert always, and that there are opportunities when you're learning new things. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously taking on new challenges, taking on new roles means you're also taking calculated risks, right? So can you share an example where you've successfully taken a risk and maybe how you prepared yourself mentally to do that?
Yeah, I feel like I'm continuing to talk about sort of that first of the three inflection points I talked about, or the second, I guess, of the three inflection points, which was the move away from my 10 years of law practice to a role in our on our business side. But that felt like a huge risk to me at the time, right? I had investment in law school, quite literally time and money in training me to be a lawyer. I also had investment in the number of years that I'd spent developing my career as a lawyer. And all I really knew at that point, after college, 3 years of law school, and almost 10 years of doing it, was that I knew I was pretty good at it. I was not failing in any respect kind of as a lawyer. I actually think I was a pretty good lawyer. But I also knew I wasn't happy doing it. And so, there sort of came that point where I really felt like it was important to find my way into something that I enjoyed. It was no longer about sort of chasing whatever the next kind of important career door opening opportunity might be, and more about reaping some of the rewards of the investment that you've made to do something that you might actually like and enjoy. And so it felt like a huge risk to move to that asset management team. because I wasn't sure that I'd be able to figure out, how a financial model works. I wasn't sure that I would be successful in looking at deals through a business lens as opposed to looking at them through a legal lens. And there were as many examples as there were. Well, there weren't too many examples like Arnie, obviously, but there were other examples of lawyers that had transitioned out. But there were also examples of lawyers that had transitioned out successfully, I should say. But there were other examples of lawyers that had transitioned out to business roles unsuccessfully and then had to kind of, rebound back into legal careers. And I definitely didn't want to do that. So it felt like a huge risk to do that. I felt much more kind of a C when I first joined that team in terms of being on a much steeper learning curve than maybe I had even anticipated. And it took a while to feel like I was settling in and gain some confidence back that I really didn't have any issues having when I was practicing law. So and ultimately, obviously, it paid off, and I did settle in. I learned a lot. I was given opportunities after that I wouldn't have had but for having making that move. But it definitely took a willingness to kind of take a leap into a very uncomfortable place and challenge myself and see if it was going to give me the things that I was looking for. And thankfully, in that case, it really did.
Did you have days where you, at the beginning, where you went home and you went, "Oh, I don't know about this," or do you have like your own internal pep talk? Like, how, how do you mentally get from that place of where you think maybe I don't know if this was a good idea to persevering to get to the other side?
Well, maybe in some ways, thankfully, I'm motivated more by the discomfort than I am uncomfortable with the discomfort, if that makes any sense at all.
Yep.
So I find that the challenge in the discomfort motivating, because obviously I don't like to fail, and I think I've got a bit of a competitive drive in me as well, and so the discomfort of that risk and challenge was helpful in keeping me engaged and motivated and driven. That's not true 100% of the time, though, in fairness. So there were certainly times, and I won't divulge the specifics of the review that I got the first year that I was working for Joel in asset management, but it was different, let's say, than the reviews that I'd grown accustomed to getting at year end as a lawyer. And I did kind of have moments after that where I said to myself, "Did I do the right thing? And am I on a right path? Am I on the right path to succeed in having taken this leap a year ago, or do I need to think about maybe being less happy doing what I'm doing, but maybe better at what I'm doing?" And going back to the old role. And again, thankfully, I chose the I don't think I'm going to get fired, but maybe it's going to take me a little bit longer to get there. And I'm so much happier doing what I'm doing now that there was no serious consideration really to going backwards at that point. But yeah, I just kind of had to fight through those moments when they came.
Yeah, and the industry's richer for you doing that, obviously.
Well, I don't know about that, but thank you for
I
saying
think so.
so.
I think so. Having had the opportunity to work with you, let's talk a little bit about building a network, because obviously you've got a really big network. But for a lot of people, networking isn't something that's very comfortable. How have you developed your network, and how do you network in a way that suits your personality?
Yeah. So I would start with the last part of that question, which is how do I do it in a way that suits my personality? I do feel like I am well, I don't feel this way. I know I am introverted. And so I have to sort of approach the business world, both looking at relationships around the hallways of Marriott, but also our relationships with our owners and franchisees, which are really important as working in our development function as an extrovert, right? You kind of, you're the introvert in an extroverted world. And so I do it in ways that I'm comfortable with, but I also try to do it in ways that feel authentic and natural to me. And so, for a lot of the early part of my career, before I really took the development role, I was I was focused on, my network was really more of an internal network within Marriott. A lot of my jobs were focused on engaging with other Marriott associates, and so that networking was to try to connect with my coworkers in ways that would, one, people that I liked. Thankfully, in our company and in our industry, I find a lot of people that I like. So I think building a network with people that you enjoy spending time with and trust their feedback is maybe the most important aspect of that. And then secondarily, in those early days, it was also about finding people that I felt might be able to help sort of guide me in certain respects around career opportunities. And so, a few of the jobs that I got post law department came because I had reached out to leaders of those teams and expressed interest in learning more about them, and potentially, if there were ever an opening, working on those teams. And some of the people in those shops, Joel, you mentioned, who hired me into that asset management role, but others as well. Eventually, Tony as well, when Tony hired me into development back in 2010. Not only were an important part of my network, but were important kind of champions and mentors to me as I was working through different aspects of my career. But it was important. It was important to me to find people that I felt like I could trust and that I connected with, and that that there was, you could also develop a friendship with, beyond just kind of professional guidance and advice they may be willing to give.
It's a wonderful industry where I think a lot of people will meet for business reasons and then become friends afterwards. So I don't know if that happens in every industry, but I do find it a lot in ours. Let's talk a little bit about mentors and champions, because you touched on it a second ago, and you had mentioned Joel. But I'm curious, how important is it to find champions and mentors, and how do you go about it?
I think it's really important. It's hard to describe kind of a step-by-step guide into making it happen, finding mentors and champions. But I was given a piece of advice career advice when I was still at the law firm, so very early in my career, post law school, from one of the partners at the time, who told me that as important as it is to have others that are kind of looking out for you and to be on radar screens and things, for when there's opportunities that present themselves, there really is nobody who will care about your career more than you're going to care about it. And I've carried that advice with me through my entire career. In fact, I tell people I think it's some of the best career advice I was ever given, is recognize your own role in your career, because just naturally you're going to care about it more than anyone else might. At the same time, that decisions that are going to be made that could involve you, whether it's a new opportunity for a different role within a big company, or a promotion within that company, that it's going to take somebody being willing to kind of stand up and advocate for you while you're also advocating for yourself to make those kinds of things happen. So while I think it's incredibly important, and maybe singularly important at the top of the order, for you to be willing to be an advocate for yourself, having mentors and champions is maybe next in terms of significance, when you think about the roles that they will play in those opportunities, in those promotions. And I can point to multiple instances in my background here at Marriott where that's played out to be true. In terms of how to go about finding mentors and champions, it's maybe a corollary to the question you just asked about how to build a network. I see it as sort of two sides of the same coin. Find people that you can trust, express to them what you're interested in, try to build a relationship so that they know you and understand you, and vice versa. Um, and maybe also recognize that while a broad array of relationships are really important, it's deeper relationships with a couple, maybe a couple people that have an ability to have a real influence, maybe more important than having surface relationships with kind of surface level relationships with everyone. So I was a significant beneficiary of some folks along the way that really took an interest in me, and then thought of me when opportunities presented themselves, and in part because I was in their ear telling them about things I was interested in doing, but also because they were willing to be supporters of mine, and it was a significant factor in the different roles that I was given a chance to try over the course of my career.
I love that. And I want to go a little bit deeper, actually, because you just touched on that you were in their ear when new opportunities came about. Can we talk a little bit about advocating for ourselves? Because you've already started to allude to it, but I wanted to go a bit deeper into it. Because one of the things you're really good at doing is when you see an opportunity that you're interested in, you'll go and talk to someone and express your interest. And not everybody does that. And not everyone has the confidence to do that. In fact, there's a generalization that women are not very good at advocating for themselves or holding up their hand for an opportunity they'd be interested in. I know I haven't been as good at it as I should have been. Can you share how you've done it? How have you advocated for yourself when you see opportunities you're interested in?
Yeah, and I'll confess, it wasn't super comfortable for me either. Again, and you give me a Myers-Briggs test, I'm definitely going to come up on the introverted side of the IE part of that equation. And yet you just have to do it. As I mentioned, I knocked on some doors to expressed interest in different roles along the way, so that people could think of me if and when there were opportunities, on their team, and I helped them understood who I was as a person, and what I understood, what I thought my skills were, and how I thought I could be an asset for them on their teams if opportunities presented themselves. And there are at least two occasions, if not three, of the multiple jobs that I've had since having come to Marriott, where that was that played a direct role in me being given the opportunity to kind of compete for that job at the end of the day. I mean, by no means did it result in me getting the job, but certainly it was having been in their ear, putting myself on their radar screen, got me in a consideration set, so that when I applied for those roles, I don't think I otherwise might have been thought of. And so I did have to reach out of my comfort zone, and kind of put myself out there as having interest in it, and it paid dividends. So even when it's not easy, again, it gets back to that career advice that I got early in my days at the law firm, that nobody is going to care more about your career than you're going to care about it. And what that translates into is taking some responsibility for your career. By all means, I am a believer that if you do a great job at your job, and go above and beyond, that will get noticed, and that will and should result rightfully in opportunities coming your way. But it will not result in every opportunity that could come your way if coupled with doing a great job and going above and beyond and making sure that you're showing up on those radar screens. You're also willing to put yourself out there and put yourself into the ears of people who have the ability to influence your career, and letting them know that about who you are and what you want to do and what your aspirations are. I think that's a really important role for leaders generally, to understand kind of the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of everybody on their team. But I also think that there's a responsibility that comes to that for others around the organization, the people that are on those teams, to convey that proactively to their leaders, but maybe equally as important to people who aren't their leaders, especially if they may be thinking, as I was at different times in my career, about different roles in the company and different departments than the one that I was in.
Yeah, I think I love so much about what you said. One of them was be really good at your job, right? Because people are going to notice that. But then that's not always going to give you all the
Yeah,
options,
that's
the
table stakes,
opportunities.
right? Because
Right.
falling below being really good at your job, bad things happen.
Yep.
But when you're really good at your job, then you're doing the, the things that present the kind of the opportunity for opportunity, right? You've done the task number one, which is just be great at what you're supposed to do. But you do have to go beyond that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who work really hard, they do a great job, but then they think that's going to be enough and that things will naturally happen. And some things do naturally happen, but I do think as you start to get towards the top of the pyramid and there are fewer and fewer opportunities, everyone's table stakes, as you said, doing a good job. So if you want those roles, and as you get more senior, there are fewer of them, you need to hold your hand up and ask for it and advocate for yourself if you're
Absolutely.
going to be on that list.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, one of my favorite questions on our interview series is what advice would you give to your younger self? And I don't know if it's the advice that you just mentioned earlier, but I'm curious, what would you tell your younger self?
Well, thankfully, I had somebody else to give me that little ditty of advice at the time, so I wouldn't have to give it to myself. But look, I mean, I spent a number of years post law school being pretty unhappy doing what I was doing, progressively less unhappy. I liked what I was doing at Marriott a lot more than I liked what I was doing at the law firm. But I was about 10 years into a career and really had been in 3 different jobs, 2 different employers, and really wasn't enjoying what I was doing. But was nonetheless working pretty hard at it as well and trying to be successful at it. And uh, and because I eventually found a way out of that into jobs that progressively gave me an increasing level of job satisfaction, personal satisfaction, and happiness. I guess maybe the advice that I would give to my younger self, if I caught me in that window of 10 years, there is that you're on the path. It's a process, and realize that path and that process is part of what will lead you into a place that I can't describe as sort of every day is jumping for joy and Zen levels of just off the charts levels of sort of Zen and happiness. But I really do love what I do. I have loved the time that I've spent at Marriott, especially after I transitioned out of law. And I don't think, honestly, those opportunities present themselves to me had I not done the things that I had done before, which doesn't mean that somebody else couldn't have ended up in the same job coming up through a different path. They did before me. But in my case, it was that path that led me to a place of job satisfaction, professional satisfaction, personal happiness and growth. And so maybe that's what I tell myself in my younger days is, just realize that, it's part of the process and you're on the path, and keep working hard and keep doing a great job, and realize that, things will, there is a payoff for this investment of time and development that you're making in yourself, even in days where it feels like it's a grind. And I think, by the way, it's a little bit of a challenge at times with the younger generation. I have 2 kids that are in their 20s, early 20s. I think that sort of career progression patience maybe is not the single greatest trait of the next generation, but I do think that investment is an understanding that sort of good things come to those that not just wait, but are investing their time in development is an important lesson for, it would have been an important lesson for me in my early 20s. And I think it's an important one today.
It's wonderful. Well, as I expected, we are running out of time because I know there's so much great content for you to share, which you have done today.
That's your
And
nice way of saying I'm really talkative, Len, but I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to chat.
Well, I think there's been so much great content that you shared that I wanted you to just go deeper and share more. So, but I'd love if you could share one final piece of advice, just keeping in mind that our mission at DEI Advisors is around empowering personal success. What advice would you offer to women and underrepresented groups who are looking to advance their career? One final nugget.
Well, I can't say the best piece of career advice I ever got was to know that you're going to care more about your career than anyone else, and as a result of that, invest yourself in helping to facilitate outcomes for yourself that you're searching. So putting yourself out there, building networks, finding champions and mentors, doing the things that we've, spent the last several minutes talking about. I can't say that's the best piece of career advice I've ever gotten without saying that's it. I mean, I really do believe that that's the best thing that I can convey as well, which is to recognize that and invest in yourself and do the things necessary to put yourself out there, even where it's uncomfortable. Without, by the way, being somebody, I'm not trying to tell people be somebody you're not, create a kind of inauthentic work version of yourself. That is not the advice that I would give. Do it in a way that maybe you're least uncomfortable with, if it's uncomfortable for you, but in a way that feels like it's still true to who you are and authentic to who you are as a person. But be willing to get uncomfortable a bit in order to advocate for yourself and be your own champion first, because I think that that will help with all the other pieces that are also important to being having a long and successful career. And it never stops, by the way. I mean, I still feel that's true, even with the number of years that I have. Continue to be curious, continue to work hard, continue to do a great job, continue to care about yourself and others, and continue to invest in yourself in ways that hopefully continue to allow you to learn, grow, and get additional opportunities.
Thank you. As a fellow introvert, I love the way you stated that we can still make headway even though it's uncomfortable. You just lean into that a little bit. So
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Noah. Really appreciate your sharing your insights and your journey with our audience. And
It's really my pleasure.
Thank you. And for our audience, if you enjoyed this interview with Noah, I hope you'll go to our website, deiadvisors.org, for more interviews with hospitality leaders. Thank you.